What's going on, everybody? Chad with Dreamwood Rings. Today we are working with a Larimar trustone and a Koa Wood in a tungsten band. Trustone is a mix of ore, the actual stone, and a resin to make it easy to work with. So it has genuine stone in there, and it has genuine colors. So true stone is going to look exactly like a normal stone, but just it's going to be easy to work with, nice and pliable. So basically we're just going to cut that with our blade. We measured out 3 millimeters. The ring is going to have 3 millimeters of Larimar, 1 millimeter of Koa Wood inside the tungsten blank. Once we get our true stone cut out, we need to measure the inside of the ring so that it will fit around the tungsten band once we cut it in half. So I'm going to throw that on the lathe and use a little hole drill bit and just drill out the center. Super easy. We threw it on the chuck, just threw a drill bit at the end of the lathe, and we're going to go size by size. So we don't want any breakouts, and so the less you cut out, a little bit better. It probably would handle just fine if you started with the big one, but I didn't want to risk it. So once we drill it through this thicker one, we will see if it is the same size as the tungsten with the calipers. So it is there. However, we want to make sure that there's a difference. I made some mistakes on this ring. The reason is this is an exact fit, and that's not going to work. You need to make sure about 0.2 millimeters that your inside diameter of the stone is 0.2 to 0.25 millimeters bigger than the outside diameter of your tungsten ring. But ultimately, once you get the inside diameter to the right diameter, I'm measuring exactly half, and I'm going to take the razor blade and just hit it with a hammer a few times. Listen, I would not recommend gluing it right now. This is, I learned this. Do not glue this. Put the stone on there, make sure it fits, and if it does fit, you can use a thin CA glue, let it run through it. You can also use a zip tie. You're about to see me zip tie as soon as I get this glue finished up. The reason I wouldn't glue it is because I find out later that this doesn't actually fit. So I have to rip it out and resize it. So look at that. It's terrible. But when you get the right size fit, take a zip tie without the glue, put it on there, and then make sure it's nice and tight. And then you can glue it with a thin CA, make sure it's in really good. And it ends up like this. Once it's dry in there, you got a nice tight fit. You're gonna not even be able to see the gaps if you get a nice tight fit with this. And that's just a matter of making the inside diameter of the stone, or even wood for this matter, a little bit bigger than your tungsten band. So we're just cutting this down, going all the way down to the tungsten band, and I want to be able to see it before we cut the inlay for the Koa wood. So I'm just sanding it up, cleaning it up, making it a lot easier to see for myself. Once we have it all cleaned up, I'm going to take these little tools, well, I guess first mark it with the calipers, make sure that we don't get it bigger than a millimeter. Take this little baby guy and cut an exact millimeter cut out of there. You can measure the calipers, it looks pretty good right now. And I put the sandpaper in there just to clean out the gap a little bit. It does make it easier to work with if it's nice and clean in there. And you can see this gap is just really clear. It's pretty nice. Now onto the Koa Wood. I got this Koa Wood straight from Hawaii. Mom brought it over from Hawaii, and it's just a really thin board. It's probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 millimeters thick, and then just a long board. So I don't know where I would buy it. I'd probably just this board will probably last me a long while, especially if I'm using 1, 2, 3 millimeters at a time. Look how long that is. It's gonna last a while. So I measured the 1 millimeter of the gap, added the width of the blade, and then just sawing that. Now it's gonna be a super tiny thin piece, and then using the calipers, making sure it fits okay, sanding where it doesn't. We do want this to be a little bit thinner than 1 millimeter, just a tiny bit, because we're gonna put it in water, and the water is gonna make it a little bit thicker, and so it's gonna be a perfect fit if we do that. Once we get it to the millimeter, I'm just making it thinner at this point so that it's gonna be easy to bend. Probably 2 to 3 millimeters, and then just rolling it in the inlay really slowly, making sure that you don't get any huge cracks. Some cracks are okay. The wood grain you really won't be able to tell, especially with the Koa wood being so dark and having the natural cuts anyway. And so you just roll it nice and slowly into that gap. I did find after my third or fourth one of these that the thinner you get the wood, the easier it is. And so I got it down as thin as I could, and so that it still shows up. It's probably 1/10 of a millimeter above the tungsten is what I would get it to. So just real thin. And then you won't have this issue either. You do want to put this in here without glue, and it should stick. If you have a tight fit, it will stick in there without glue. You shouldn't have any issues rolling that in there. Once you get it rolled in, all good. We'll take some thin CA glue and just dab a little bit in here. Now, even if you're dealing with normal pieces of wood and not the little rolly pieces, you can do the same thing we did to the Larimar. Cut it in half, get the outside diameter, and just make it a 1 millimeter thick wood piece, and just put 2 halves together. It's gonna go together really well. You won't be able to see where it's cut in half. Maybe a small little cut. Nobody's gonna notice. You'll be the only one that can actually see it. Once that is dry of the thin CA glue, I'm just taking a polished 400 grit. Once it's down there, you want it probably like 1/10 millimeter under the tungsten. We want enough room. Want to give enough room for our finish, so it's a nice layer of finish, our UV resin, to lay on. So right now we're just polishing it using the mesh pads to get that Larimar stone really shiny. You can see here, one good trick is take that little cotton Dremel tool, brush it off. I take some acetone is what I'm rubbing on it right now. Acetone's going to remove any white marks you have, any blemishes, usually anything white, which comes from the glue sometimes. So take a little bit of acetone, not a ton, to clean that out. And then I just add a little bit of, I think there must have been some scratch on here or something, so I'm just going through the mesh pads again, getting rid of that scratch. And then we'll brush it off with the Dremel cotton buffing wheel you saw there. And then that's it. That's done. And we can now take our UV resin, and I'm just going to pour it on. This is the easiest way I found to apply it. Pour it on, roll it until it's covered, and then you're just going to keep rolling it for probably a few seconds, maybe 15 to 25 seconds, whatever you feel is right. And that goes in the UV bath to cure for 25 to 30 minutes when we bring it back to the lathe and clean off the UV resin. Again, when we put the UV resin on, it went above the tungsten ledge, which is fine because we're going to take it off with the lathe sandpaper and make sure it's all cleaned up off of the ledges. You're just going to do the same thing that you did with the stone, which is basically 200 to clean it down, go up to 400. I go to 800, and then start with the mesh pads 8 to 16, and up all the way to 12,000. You won't hardly see any scratches, if any at all. Once you're done with the mesh pads, take it to the polishing wheel, polish it really well. I just go in all directions. I don't know if it helps or anything, but it always looks really good afterwards. So take it to the wheel. I use Zam polish, and then that buffing wheel I just got from Home Depot. It's just a drill buffing wheel that I attached to my lathe. Works really well. And that's it with the tungsten. It's nice. You can take a razor blade to clean off the edges of any extra glue or finish that you got on there. You can also just take sandpaper, 220 or 400 sandpaper on the inside. It's not going to scratch the tungsten, which is really amazing. And I just take this little buffing wheel, clean it off, and that's it. Easy enough. And you have this perfect little guy. One of my favorite rings. The tungsten core is available on Shop Dreamwood, as well as a lot of other supplies. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always available to ask questions too and help wherever I can. And thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you guys next time.